Ladies and gentlemen, stop scrolling. Whatever you thought you knew about this courtroom saga, throw it out the window. Because today, the drama didn't just escalate, it exploded. What happens when a $200 million ruling collides with ego, rage, and a man who just realized he lost everything in one sentence? Simple. Control disappears, and chaos takes its place. Witnesses say the air changed the moment the judge finished speaking. 1 second, silence. The next, a sudden movement. A raised voice. A step forward that made the entire courtroom freeze. Yes, Mendeecees allegedly lost control, and Yandy was right there when it happened. Was it shock? Was it fury? Or was it the realization that the power he once had was officially gone? Ask yourself this. How does someone react when their image collapses, their money is on the line, and the person they once tried to silence is now winning publicly? Cameras rolling, security on edge, and a moment so intense that people are already calling it the most explosive courtroom scene of the year. But here's the real question. What really triggered the outburst? The money? The humiliation? Or the fact that Yandy didn't flinch? Stay with me, because what happened next wasn't just emotional, it was unforgettable. The moment the judge finished reading the ruling, something snapped. Not loudly at first, no screaming, no chaos. Just a sharp inhale. A chair scraping slightly against the floor. And then every head in the courtroom turned at the exact same time. Because Mendeecees was no longer sitting still. Up until that second, he'd been stone-faced, staring straight ahead like a man rehearsing restraint. But insiders say the words 200 million hit differently when they're addressed directly to you, especially when they're being awarded to the one person you can no longer control. According to witnesses, his jaw tightened, his shoulders squared, and he leaned forward just enough to make people uncomfortable. That was the first sign. The warning tremor before the quake. Yandy, meanwhile, didn't move. And that, ironically, made everything worse. Let's rewind for context. This wasn't just another messy celebrity breakup spiraling in public. This was the collapse of a relationship that once sold itself as bulletproof. Years of interviews. Carefully curated redemption arcs. Public promises of loyalty and ride-or-die devotion. And now, a courtroom. A confirmed divorce. And a financial ruling so massive it felt less like compensation and more like judgment. As the judge began outlining the reasoning behind the decision, the room grew heavier by the second. Alleged deception. Violations of marital trust. Actions that demonstrated intentional disregard. Each phrase landed like a controlled blow. And with every sentence, Mendeecees' composure visibly deteriorated. Sources claim that's when he turned toward Yandy. Not dramatically. Not yet. Just enough for the cameras to catch it. What followed wasn't a punch, it didn't need to be. It was a sudden surge forward. A raised voice that shattered the courtroom's formality. Words thrown with the kind of force that doesn't require contact to feel threatening. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone audibly whispered, "Oh no." And security immediately shifted positions. Yandy instinctively stepped back. That single movement became the image of the day. In that moment, the narrative flipped completely. This was no longer about money or paperwork. It was about power. About a man realizing, in real time, that the person he once stood beside had slipped permanently beyond his reach, and that the system wasn't on his side anymore. Court officials moved fast. Voices overlapped. The judge called for order, gavel striking harder than before. Mendeecees was restrained, not tackled, not dragged, but firmly blocked from moving any closer. And that was enough. Enough to confirm what everyone already felt. The loss of control was real. Social media detonated within minutes. Did you see his face? He looked unhinged. That wasn't grief, that was rage. Yandy stayed calm. That says everything. Clips froze on specific frames. Analysts replayed body language like it was evidence in itself. And anonymous sources wasted no time filling in the blanks. One claimed the outburst wasn't spontaneous, it was building for days. Another said the fine print of the ruling sealed it. A third insisted this wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about humiliation. Because Yandy didn't react the way he expected. No tears. No yelling. No collapse. just distance. And in a courtroom where every movement is magnified, that silence spoke louder than anything Mendeecees could have said. The courtroom never fully recovered from that moment. Even after order was restored, the energy stayed sharp, like everyone was waiting for something else to go wrong. And according to people inside the room, that's exactly how it felt: unstable, unpredictable, unfinished. Once Mendeecees was forced back into his seat, the damage was already done. You can restrain a body, but you can't unring a moment. His breathing was visible now. Heavy, uneven, the kind that betrays adrenaline. Meanwhile, Yandy stood quietly beside her legal team, eyes forward, posture composed. No smirk, no victory pose, just stillness. And somehow, that contrast made the outburst look even worse. Behind the scenes, things moved fast. Court officials reportedly held an emergency sidebar, discussing whether the incident crossed into contempt territory. Security remained unusually close for the remainder of the session, a detail that didn't go unnoticed by the cameras or the internet. Within minutes, hashtags exploded. Some called it a meltdown. Others went further, labeling it a public unraveling. Then came the leaks. Anonymous sources, allegedly from within the courthouse, began sharing details that hadn't made it into the official record. Claims of earlier warnings. Allegations that Mendeecees had been visibly agitated even before the ruling was read. One source suggested he'd been pacing during recess, muttering about being set up and betrayed. Another alleged he believed the footage presented earlier, showing him with Tamar, would never surface in court. That belief, apparently, was wrong. Public reaction was ruthless. Commentators dissected everything: the step forward, the raised voice, the way Yandy instinctively retreated. That wasn't an argument, one viral post read. That was intimidation. Others debated intent. Was it rage? Panic? Or the realization that the narrative he controlled for years had officially collapsed? Talk shows jumped in immediately. Panels argued whether the court should impose additional restrictions. Legal analysts speculated about protective orders. And somewhere in the noise, a new question began trending. Should Mendeecees be allowed back into that courtroom at all? Yandy's silence only fueled the fire. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't post online. She left the courthouse surrounded by her legal team, expression unreadable. That restraint was interpreted in 1,000 different ways: strength, strategy, shock. But one thing was clear: she didn't need to say anything. The footage said enough. Mendeecees' camp, on the other hand, scrambled. A brief statement surfaced hours later, describing the incident as emotionally charged and mischaracterized. It did nothing to slow the momentum. If anything, it poured fuel on it. Because once the public senses spin, they push harder. By the end of the day, the story had shifted again. It was no longer just about a $200 million ruling. It was about behavior, about consequences, about what happens when someone used to control finally realizes they can't. And the court? The court was watching closely. By the time the session adjourned, the story had outgrown the courtroom. What happened in those few seconds, one step forward, one raised voice, one instinctive retreat, had already set off a chain reaction that no statement or clarification could contain. This was no longer just a legal proceeding. It was a reckoning. Insiders say the judge's chambers went into immediate review mode. Not to relitigate the divorce, that was settled, but to assess conduct. The phrase, maintaining courtroom safety, appeared repeatedly in whispered conversations, and legal commentators quickly picked up on it. Translation? What happened crossed a line. Not necessarily a criminal one yet, but a line that courts take very seriously. Speculation about consequences spread fast. Would there be a formal reprimand? A contempt warning? Additional restrictions on proximity during future appearances? Legal experts online pointed out that when emotions boil over in court, judges often respond decisively, not loudly, but permanently. And the possibility of further sanctions hung in the air like a storm cloud. Outside, the public backlash intensified. Sponsors were rumored to be reassessing partnerships. Scheduled appearances quietly disappeared from calendars. The same outlets that once framed Mendeecees as resilient now described him as volatile. The shift was subtle but devastating. Image, once cracked, doesn't shatter loudly, it erodes. Yandy, meanwhile, became the unexpected focal point of the aftermath. Support poured in. Messages framing her as composed under pressure went viral. Commentators noted how she never raised her voice, never escalated, never played into the chaos. In a moment designed to rattle her, she didn't break, and that unsettled people far more than any argument could have. Then came the rumors of what might be next. Some claimed Yandy's legal team was considering additional protections. Others suggested the court could mandate behavioral conditions tied to the unpaid $200 million judgment. And the most explosive whisper of all? That further evidence, previously held back, might now be deemed relevant, given the incident. Mendeecees' silence stretched on. No follow-up statement. No clarification. Just absence. And in today's media cycle, silence doesn't calm storms, it feeds them. Every hour without response invited another theory, another insider, another layer of speculation. The narrative slipped further from his grasp with each passing minute. By nightfall, one truth had solidified. Whatever control he thought he had left was gone. The divorce was final. The money was ordered. And now the court and the public had seen something raw, unfiltered, and deeply uncomfortable. Because when the mask slips in a courtroom, it doesn't just fall to the floor. It gets entered into the record. Now that the courtroom chaos has unfolded before our very eyes, it's time to ask the questions that matter. What does this mean for Mendeecees, for Yandy, and for the $200 million judgment that's still hanging in the balance? How much damage has already been done to reputations, alliances, and public trust? And most importantly, what else might be lurking beneath the surface, waiting for someone brave enough to reveal it? You've seen the meltdown, the confrontation, the shockwaves that spread across social media and beyond. But here's the thing, the story isn't over. It's alive, breathing, and evolving with every new rumor, every insider tip, and every public reaction. And that's where you come in. We need your eyes, your theories, your voice. What really pushed Mendeecees over the edge? Was this a moment of human weakness, or is there a larger strategy unfolding behind closed doors? How far will Yandy go to protect herself and claim what's rightfully hers? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, don't hold back. Share your wildest theories, your sharpest observations, and yes, even your hottest takes. This isn't just gossip, it's a cultural phenomenon unfolding in real time. Smash that like button if you were stunned by the courtroom meltdown, share this video so your friends can join the conversation, and subscribe to stay ahead of every shocking twist, leak, and revelation. Because one thing is for sure, in the world of celebrity drama, the truth doesn't stay buried for long. And when it surfaces, it explodes, reshaping everything you thought you knew. Stay tuned, stay skeptical, and get ready, because the next bombshell could drop any second.